The metallic structure to be protected is made into cathode by connecting it with more active metal. I mean, when we discussed in the electrochemical series, we understood that the most active metal is nothing but the metal that can release the electrons. I mean the anodic type metal. Okay, so again, in this method, the metallic structure which we want to protect is made into cathode by connecting it with more active metal, so that all the corrosion will concentrate only on the active metal. Okay, and this artificially made anode therefore gradually gets corroded for protecting the original metallic structure. Okay, you are actually sacrificing one metallic object for protecting the metal surface or a metallic structure, important metallic structure. Okay, so this is what we say in the sacrificial anodic protection method. Okay, and what are the commonly used sacrificial anodes? In fact, they are aluminum, zinc, and magnesium. Okay, these are the ones which can easily release electrons so that they can be used to protect the metal surfaces. So where and how we use this method? In fact, in this method, we use magnesium or zinc sheets hung around the hull of the boats or ships. Okay, so around the hull or the boat, we can hang the magnesium or the zinc sheets, so that they can act as a sacrificial anode. Okay, and usually this zinc or magnesium anode, sacrificial anode, will protect the metallic surface. Actually, the ships and the boats are made up of iron, so they can protect basically the iron surface, and this zinc and magnesium in turn will get corroded, and that is why they are all called as sacrificial anodes, because they sacrifice themselves to protect the iron surface. Okay, so where it can be used, as I said, it can be used in boats and ships. It can be used for protecting some of the underground pipelines, cables, and we can actually avoid soil corrosion. Okay, and even some of the cases we can use it for protection of boilers where we produce steams. Okay, so this is the what happens basically in the sacrificial anodic production. Okay, so whatever the metal sacrificial anode you have, that will release the electrons, so that your important metallic structure won't need to lose any electrons. Whenever there is a corrosive situation, the electrons supplied by the sacrificial anode will be consumed, and your metal surface will be protected. This is the mechanism, or this is the way how this sacrificial anodic protection works. Okay, and this is about the board. There will be a sacrificial anode placed in the hull, and it will be covered with shown here, and it will be covered with copper protected or heavily cabled copper wire, so that whenever the corrosion situation occurs, your sacrificial anode from the sacrificial anode, electrons will be drawn, and it will be consumed during the corrosion process, and your metallic structure, I mean the board structure, will be saved. Okay, this is what happens in the sacrificial anodic protection method. And the second one within the electrochemical protection or cathodic protection is impressed current cathodic protection method. In fact, in this method, the current is applied in the opposite direction of the corrosion current. What we mean by opposite direction of the corrosion current? Okay, here this is the metallic object. This is a, let's say this is a pipeline buried in soil or in a different environment. I mean differential aerated environment. And what is the natural corrosion process? Whenever there is a corrosion environment, electrons will flow from the metallic structure, right? it is supposed to flow from here, so that electrons will be drawn out and corrosion products will be produced. So what they are trying to do in this method, impressed current cathodic protection method, is that you will have a energy, you will have a battery where you will supply the electrons to your pipeline. That means the electrons will flow in the opposite direction. This is what I say as the current is applied in the opposite direction of the corrosion current. Okay, so that there won't be any necessity for your metal to lose the electrons, right? So this is what we do here, and this can be done by connecting negative terminal of the battery to the metallic structure to be protected, and positive terminal of the battery to an inert anode. Here again, remember that we are using inert anode, not sacrificial anode. In the case of sacrificial anode, you don't have any battery, so your anode itself will release electrons to protect your metal surface. But in the case of impressed current method, you have a battery which supplies the electrons in the opposite direction of the corrosion process, so that your metal surface is protected. So whenever you have a negative negative terminal, you will have a positive terminal, and that is connected to the inert anode. Usually, what is meant by a inert anode? Inert anode is something which do not release electrons. Okay, I mean, I am simplifying the concepts. So which do not release the electrons. In this case, or even we can easily understand like the anode which do not get corroded, because when a metal surface or a metal releases the electrons, it get corroded, right? So let's say you have a material which cannot get corroded, but it can act as a anode. The best examples are the carbons. Here I have mentioned graphite as a anode, which can be used for impressed corrosion cathodic protection method. Okay, so by connecting the negative terminal of the battery to the metallic structure and positive terminal of the battery to the inert anode, we can make this setup. And basically what are the different anodes used for this purpose? As I shown here, graphite is one of the kind. Another one is platinized titanium, and usually this anode is buried in something called as backfill. What is a backfill? Backfill is something that contains mixture of gypsum, coke, grease, and sodium sulfate. So this backfill actually gives a good electrical conduct to the anode. Okay, so this kind of impressed current cathodic protection method is usually very much useful for tanks, pipelines, transmission line towers. There are large electrical towers, transmission line towers we can see in the outside of the cities, which can be protected by this method. And okay, so these are some of the applications and how we can use the impressed current cathodic protection method. And so far we discussed about how we can control the corrosion by changing or modifying the property of the metal itself. There is another way that is called as modification of the environment. Okay, so how we can modify the environment to avoid or control the corrosion. The first one is a de-aeration. When we talked about the mechanism of corrosion process, we discussed that corrosion happens due to the interaction between the environment, corrosive environment, or the gases available in the environment, or the moisture available in the environment. Okay, so by removing the air from the interacting environment, you can avoid the corrosion. Let's say you can understand from a simple example. Let's say again the same one. You have a boiler. In this boiler you will have water to produce steam. So this water, if it contains significant quantities of oxygen, then there is a possibility that it can easily interact with the metal surface, and it can possibly increase the corrosion rate. So if we have a technique to remove this dissolved oxygen from the water that produces a steam, you can actually reduce or nullify the interaction between the oxygen and the metal surface. Okay, this is what we are trying to do in the deaeration process. How we can do this one? By using some of the chemicals such as sodium sulfite or hydrazine, which can consume the oxygen or react with the oxygen, so the quantity of oxygen present in the water will be reduced. And we have some other methods also. One of them is the keeping the water in a vacuum condition, where the let's say you have a vacuum desiccator and you can keep the water inside that one. So when you apply the vacuum, the dissolved gases, not only the oxygen, the total gases dissolved in the water will be removed from the water. Okay, so this is one of the way you can modify the environment, interacting environment or corrosive environment, for the purpose of controlling the corrosion. And we also understand that humidity or the moisture present in the air also causes the corrosion. Okay, so you have to go for dehumidification of the environment. How you can reduce the humidity or remove the humidity from the environment where the moisture and the metal surface interacts. Okay, the best case is to have some of the chemicals or reagents called as silica gel or alumina or molecular sieves. They are all known for absorbing the moisture. They can hold the moisture within themselves, so that the immediate environment will not have the moisture. Okay, they are the dehumidifying agents, we can say. So the fourth one, alkaline neutralization. In case if your environment, the corrosive environment, let's say the same boiler, your water, if your water has a acidic pH, what happens? If the water is acidic in nature, what happens? We know that if this metallic surface is made up of iron, iron gets corroded very easily in the acidic environment, but iron gets corroded or it gets insignificant corrosion in the alkaline environment or neutral environment. So when it is even slightly acidic, we can say the corrosion rate is really higher than the ones compared to the alkaline environment. So if it is possible, we can neutralize the acidic environment so that the metal surface will be protected. Okay, this is what we do in the alkaline neutralization. Then the fifth topic, using corrosion inhibitors. Okay, to explain this one, let's again take the example of the boiler. I mean steam production, the boiler used for steam production. When the steam is produced, they use the water for production of steam. We all know that water not only contains the dissolved gases, it may also contain certain quantities of dissolved salts, right? These dissolved salts may form scales around the metallic surface or sometimes sludges during the steam production process. These sludges and scales will settle down or will form around the metallic structure, which can act as a thermal insulator. So whenever you increase the temperature to increase the production of steam, you will not get the sufficient quantities of steam that you expected or you estimated. You will always get reduced quantities of steam because of the formation of this scale or the sludges. We discussed about this scale and sludge formation in the first unit, water technology, so I am not going to tell in detail. Okay, so to remove these sludges and scales, what the industries do is to add or to wash the metallic structure using some acidic solutions. So definitely this acidic solution will remove these sludges and scales, but you should remember that this acidic solution can also interact with the metallic surface. That is the problem. So if we have a chemical, I mean a small quantity of chemical that is added to this acidic solution, so that it can only remove the scales but not interact with the metal surface, that is what we call as corrosion inhibitors. Corrosion inhibitors are something that we add in very small quantities to the corrosive environment. In this example, it is the cleaning or pickling agent or pickling solution. It is called as pickling solution. That acid solution we use to remove the scale and sludges is called as pickling solution. And if we add some chemical in very small quantities to the pickling solution, and if that reagent or chemical reduces the interaction between the metal surface and the pickling solution, then it is called as corrosion inhibitor. It can inhibit the corrosion or it can control the corrosion. Okay, this is one way we can say we can modify the environment of the metal surface so that you can reduce the corrosion rate. In fact, I have been working on this corrosion and the corrosion inhibitors for the past 10 years or so. This is one of my favorite topic because you can develop different chemicals, different inhibitors, and you can test them with different metallic structures at different environment, including the marine environment or the civil structures, so that you can know which chemical is more suitable for protecting the metallic surfaces, right? So this is one way to protect the metallic surface. This is one of the corrosion control method. Let's move to the next topic, protective coatings. When we talk about the protective coatings, there are two types. One is inorganic coating and the other one is organic coating. When we talk about the inorganic coating, there are again two different processes. Based on the processes, we can say two types. One is metallic coating and the other one is non-metallic coating. And the best examples are electroplating. The process example processes are electroplating and electroless plating, and non-metallic coatings are something you can kind of a lamination or some other things. When we talk about the organic coating, the famous one is nothing but the paints. So in the rest of the video, we will discuss about the paint and its constituents and some of its properties. Okay. So what is meant by a paint? A paint is a viscous, opaque, but not a clear one. A paint is a viscous solution, opaque solution, which is a mechanical dispersion mixture of one or more pigments in a vehicle. This is the basic definition. So if you want to understand, we can say that paint is a mixture. It contains different components called as base, fillers, vehicle, dryer, or pigments. Actually, pigment is included in the definition because that is the important component, and vehicle is the ones that carrying the pigments. Okay, so whenever we say a paint is nothing but the mixture of different components. Okay, let's see what are those components that make the paint as a paint. Constituents of paints. The most important constituent of paint is the color producing substance. It is called as pigment. Okay, pigments are the ones because not that we always like to have a white background or white color. Okay, we would like to have some different paints, different mood swinging colors. Okay, for that purpose you need something called as pigment, which gives color to your paint. Okay, here I have given one example. For white pigment, you may use a chemical called as white lead, which is nothing but the lead carbonate, lead hydroxide. Okay, Then the next constituent of paint is vehicle or drying oil. In fact, this is something non-volatile and having a property of forming films, because uh, as I said, pigments are something that gives color. But when we talk about the paint, if we paint the wall, it is supposed to stuck on the wall. It should have some film forming ability. Otherwise, we will have a high intensity paint in some portion and low intensity paint at some portion because of the non-film forming property. Okay, what are the chemicals usually used for as a vehicle or drying oil? High molecular weight fatty acids. Actually, these high molecular weight fatty acids can form protective films, and they can hold pigment particles very well, and they can actually exhibit some water repulsing property, and also they can increase toughness and durability of the paint. Okay, these are the property of the vehicle or drying oil. Again, the examples are linseed oil or dehydrated castor oil. And the third constituent of paint, thinners or solvents. Most of the cases you might have heard this word, thinners or the solvents, if you have ever painted the walls in your houses. In fact, this thinner or solvent is the most volatile portion. This one is used for reducing the viscosity of your paint, and also to produce homogeneous mixture and give the property of elasticity to your paint. Okay, in fact, most of the houses we use kerosene for this purpose, because we don't go into the shop and ask for thinners or solvents, because we all know that the petroleum products can act as a very good thinners. They can reduce the viscosity. Okay, only then you can coat it very well, only then you can get a homogeneous mixture of the paint. So thinner is one of the important constituent of the paint. And the fourth one, extenders or fillers. They are usually nothing but the white or colorless pigments. So we need something to make some different shades of color. We may need to get some new colors by mixing different paints, or by reducing the intensity of the pigment you use. For that purpose, you need something called as extenders or fillers, and usually they are nothing but the white or colorless pigments. Okay, this one actually reduces the cost of paint, because you add the colorless pigment so that the volume of the paint is increased, so obviously the cost of the paint is reduced. It retards settling of the pigment. Okay, it gives the homogeneity again, and it can be useful for modifying the shades of the pigments, and also they usually prevent the shrinkage or cracking of the paint. What is meant by shrinkage or cracking of the paint? We will see this or we will discuss these terms with suitable pictures in the forthcoming slides. Okay, the best example for extenders or fillers are talcum, gypsum and china clay. The fifth constituent of a paint is called as dryers. Dryers are the ones which actually accelerate the process of drying, because we are using different constituents for the paints, for making up of the paint. So when you use different components, what will happen? It may increase the non-volatile portion. It may increase the possibility that the paint will not get dried very easily. So to increase the rate of the drying, you may need to add certain reagents. They are called as the dryers. Usually they are the oxygen carriers or the catalysts. The examples are the metallic soaps, linolenides, resinates of cobalt, manganese and lead. Okay, these are the ones we use as a dryers. And the next constituent of paint is called as plasticizers. Plasticizers actually provide plasticity and prevents cracking of the film. Okay, if your paint do not have plasticity, then you cannot actually paint on the walls. They will stuck at a particular place like a gum, and they do not spread homogeneously throughout the wall, and there is a possibility for cracking of the film also. The most famous plasticizers used in the paints are the triphenyl phosphates and tricrysyl phosphates. And the last component of paint is anti-skinning agents, are also known as peel-off agents. These are the ones actually prevents gelling and skinning of the paint. What is meant by skinning? Skinning is nothing but the peeling off. Peeling off of the paint is one of the property we actually do not like to have in our houses, because we we invest significant money for painting the walls, and we would like to have the same color for certain time. So if we see peeling off of the paint, it means that the quality of paint is not good. So we can say that the paint may not have the anti-peel off agent or anti-skinning agent. Okay, the best example for anti-skinning agent is polyhydroxyphenol. It can actually reduce the peeling off effect in the paints. And yes, these are the failure of paints. Through these pictures you can understand the meaning of different terms. Chalking. Chalking is one of the effect we commonly observe in the houses, and most of the walls painted with white colors. If whenever you lean on the wall, or whenever you touch the wall, if the paint comes out with your skin or your dresses, then that property is called as chalking property. And we talked about cracking. Cracking happens when your paint do not have sufficient amount of anti-skinning agents, or if your paint do not have the elasticity or plasticity. Okay, because cracking happens when there is a accumulation of the paint or high concentration of the paint. So the high concentrated portion will eventually shrink. When the shrinking happens, there will be a formation of the cracks. Okay, this is what we call as cracking. And the next one is called as blistering, something like a formation of small bubbles. In fact, we know the paints have different constituents, like the ones for drying, the ones for film formation. So when we say your paint acts as a film, if it do not absorbed on the surface homogeneously, then there is a possibility for formation of small bubbles, which we call as blistering. Okay, then flaking. This also we observed in so many walls. I don't want to mention which are the walls. It may be your house or it may be your hostels, and you can see this effect. Flaking. The paint will fall down in as a flake, as a small particles, and this is also again due to the loss or due to the non-availability of some of the constituents. Okay, if the paint contains suitable constituents, and if you are selecting suitable constituents depending on the environment of your wall or the metallic surface, then you can avoid this kind of failures such as chalking, cracking or flaking. Let's move to the interesting topic. So far we discussed about corrosion control methods, and we understood that paints can actually protect the metallic surfaces. There can also be failure of paints. Okay, recently we have been seeing different advertisements that say that the houses, I mean inside the houses is the we have most polluted air, and the paint you use can protect you from the air pollution. Okay, and we have some of the people from cine industry showing some mechanism or telling that the paints can actually reduce and the paints can actually act as a filter to remove the pollutants from the air. The question is whether it is actually possible, I mean practically possible, because we understand that paints have different constituents, okay, like filler, dryers, pigments, anti-skinning agents. So when all these reagents are available in the paint, if we add some chemical and we say that that chemical can remove the air pollution, is whether it is possible. And interestingly, there are several studies around the world which says that the reagent that you use in your paint for the purpose of removing pollution from the air actually increases the pollution. In fact, titanium oxide is the one which is commonly used in the paints for reducing the air pollution. We do not use such paints for general purposes. Some of the industries may use, or some of the industries may have tried that one, because titanium oxide is the one of the known photocatalyst. By using the simple sunlight, they can decompose the pollutants, whatever the pollutants interact with the titanium oxide. So as I said, the titanium oxide degrades or decomposes the pollutants. That means that the decomposed pollutant again stucks with your wall, right? If you use the titanium oxide with your paint, that means the pollutant will be broken down and they will again stuck with your wall. That means your wall is getting increasingly higher contamination. It gets polluted increasingly. Okay, so that means the inclusion of such pollution reducing agents actually do not reduce the pollution. Okay, this is one point I would like to mention. The other one, the advertisement says that your paint can act like a filter. First of all, what is meant by a filter? The fisheries engineering students might have studied the paints. The fisheries engineering students might have studied about the filters in their first semester. Filters are something which have some porous nature, and through the pores you can separate the solid ones and the liquid ones, or we can say we can separate the particles with desired sizes. So that's the nature of a filter. If we say the paint can act as a filter, where is the pores? How or where the pollutants pass through? And what happens after the settlement or filtration of the pollutants? Again, the pollutants, if we accept the mechanism that is said in the advertisements, the pollutants will stuck with the walls. That means it increases the pollution in the houses. So the whatever the mechanism they say to remove the pollution by using the paint actually do not work in the houses. And around the world there are several studies that prove that this kind of paints actually increases the increases the pollution inside the houses, because the photocatalyst they use will convert the pollutant into volatile organic carbons. These volatile organic carbon in turn pollutants. They are nothing but the pollutants. They will increase the harm to the health of the humans and also the immediate environment. And actually some of the industries tried something differently. They used this kind of titanium oxide containing paints, and they made certain structures like this honeycomb structure or some other structures, so that they can absorb the pollutants. When we talk about the filtration, maybe this one is in line with the filtration process, but again this kind of large structures will increase the cost of the construction, and also I don't know how much efficiently this kind of large structures can actually reduce the uh, pollution, air pollution. And in some of the advertisements we see that your paint contains activated charcoal. Actually, what is a charcoal? It's a burned wood, nothing but the carbon, which contains porosity. Okay, even in some of our houses we use this charcoal for removing the bad smell in the refrigerator. So how this charcoal actually works? The charcoal works by absorbing the gases, I mean irrespective of the nature of the or the chemical substance, they absorb the gases and store inside the pores. I mean, I'm explaining in a simplest manner. So when we use this charcoal in a paint, I'm saying that charcoal has pores which can absorb the contents of the immediate environment. If I add the charcoal to the paint already has about 7 constituents. These 7 constituents may get into the pores and the pores will be filled. That means your charcoal becomes inactive for any purposes. It is no more useful. It is nothing but the dust. Right? Am I right? So the pores of the charcoal is filled with other constituents of the paint, so it cannot act further. So whatever they say in the advertisements actually do not work practically. The charcoal inclusion or the titanium oxide inclusion, what is the I mean what is the possibility for these active material like charcoal or titanium oxide, how much is the possibility for them to interact with the immediate environment? Actually it's very less, because when you mix it with the paint, they are covered with the paint, they are covered with the constituents of the paint. The possibility or the probability for these active materials such as charcoal or the titanium oxide to interact with the immediate environment is very less. So the answer to the question is no. Your paint that containing the titanium oxide or the charcoal cannot protect you from the air pollution. And the summary of this video is that the corrosion process cannot be stopped but can be controlled using 2 measures. One is by modifying the metal and other one is by modifying the environment. When we talk about the modification of the metal, you can change the property of the metal by making it as an alloy or by supporting it with some external electrons from the sacrificial anode, or by supplying electrons from a battery by means of impressed current method. In the other way, I mean by modifying the environment, you can remove the gases such as oxygen or carbon dioxide, de-aeration of the environment, or you may dehumidify the environment, or even you can try to apply some inhibitors to control the corrosion. And also you can apply paints with that has a suitable constituents or suitable property, so that you can protect the you can protect the metal surface. This is the way you can control the corrosion. And the picture shown here is the photo that is taken from the Wikipedia. This is the part in Antarctica called as Tyler Valley, and the flow of the water here looks like a blood fall. This is actually called as blood fall. This phenomena was initially thought by some of the common people, like there is a ghost, but later on it was found that the water comes out of the ice contains high quantities of metallic iron. This metallic iron, when exposed to the air, gets corroded, gets rusted, and turns into red color. Okay, That is why the this area is turned into red colored one, and this area is called as a blood fall. Just this is one of the interesting picture we can say, or we can take as an example of natural corrosion. Okay, and these are the reference books you can follow, engineering chemistry books written by different authors. And finally, thank you very much for watching.